we have this intuitive understanding of space as a kind of neutral backdrop against which the events of the world take place. And we regard space as being very different to physical matter. Even very gaseous, vaporous matter is different in our understanding to the space that it occupies. So we imagine space as a kind of box in which objects appear, or as a blank page on which you can make a mark. The mark and the page are radically different. The box, or the space that the box contains, is very different to the objects that the box contains. Oops, that's pretty windy. And that intuition of space as almost invisible, non-existent, a simply kind of neutral field in which real stuff happens, is, as I said, it's completely intuitive, and probably intuitive for good reason. There's no real reason why we should notice space. It doesn't impact upon us. When you fall through space, it's not the space that kills you, it's the hard ground at the end of that fall, for example. So there's no real reason, in evolutionary terms, why we should have developed an intuition of space as anything other than this neutral backdrop. And that understanding of space, which is part of our embodied intuitions, is formalized in Newton and Descartes. Newton's understanding of space, again, is as this neutral backdrop, and indeed time is a neutral backdrop in Newton. And we often refer to that kind of space as Cartesian, a three-dimensional emptiness in which stuff appears. And I'm just wondering, certainly as I understand it, there are some developments in contemporary physics which seriously question that. There is talk about what the granularity of space, that space itself has structure and is organized. It's not simply an emptiness. And of course, since Einstein and then latterly Schrödinger and Bohr and those guys, we know that space isn't neutral. It flexes and bends and curves and does all those things that matter does. So that distinction between matter and space doesn't seem to hold up in those terms. So I'm just wondering about how we can experience that similarity of space and matter, if it is interesting experience. I think it is. I find it interesting. So some of the things I'm thinking about, or I'm reminded of, well, first thing I'm reminded of is a workshop I did with Susan Blackstone, who wrote a book called The Enlightenment Process, which is variable in tone and quality, I think. But certainly the exercise that she does, which is a kind of seated meditation exercise, in which one tries to, it's going to sound terribly hippy-dippy, but in which one tries to inhabit not only the space of one's body, the material objects of one's body, but also the space around one's body. Certainly doing those exercises does seem to allow you to, just allow me at least, to have that sort of sense that that separation between experienced solid flesh as something which contains mind, at least in personal terms, and notionally empty space which doesn't contain mind is an artificial distinction. Secondly, I'm thinking about the spaces inside the body. Given that the most solid thing we can experience, the thing that was most difficult to doubt, is our own existence, our own hand. If I can see my hand and all else follows from that, to paraphrase Wittgenstein, then what am I seeing? Am I seeing something solid? Am I experiencing something solid? Is this what materiality feels like? Or let's pretend this is what materiality feels like. Well, I know that my hand isn't solid. I look at my hand, and not only, I'm not really talking about the space inside atoms or anything as remote as that even. I know there are gaps under my skin. So when I extend and fold my thumb against my forefinger, the flesh there shape. So there must be pockets of empty space between the tissues inside of there. But I don't experience an emptiness in my feeling of being in that hand. My feeling of being penetrates and is supervenient on the empty space inside of my hand, as well as the full space of flesh and bone and blood. And that must be the case also inside my body. There must be cavities inside here. Certainly when I'm hungry, there's a cavity inside my stomach. But I don't feel like there's a hole in my being. I feel my being persists through that emptiness. I know there's even vacuoles of some sort inside my brain. There are gaps opening inside there. And again, I don't feel like there's a hole in my life, or a hole in my sense of being who I am, where those empty spaces are. My sense of self crosses those empty gaps, either treating them as kind of blind spots and filling them in, or simply being in the space, or simply the space is part of my sense of being. Similarly, when I clench my fist, last example, when I clench my fist, and it's quite a soft clench, there is a gap inside of my fist. If I really try hard, I can sort of feel the emptiness there, but I have to really put my mind to it. I don't really feel that terribly strongly. I feel that I'm in the fist, space and flesh, completely unified, completely consistent throughout. So what all these are pointing to, I think, is an sort of intuitive, is that intuitive sense that we have that there is solid stuff, perhaps best exemplified in terms of embodied experience, with the stuff of our own bodies, which we have relatively complete access to. And then there is this space which intuition, unattended to intuition, tells us is just the box in which the stuff appears, the space around me right now. That intuition seems to be flawed. It's flawed because of what science is telling us about the granularity and structure of space. It's flawed because of what historical science tells us about the way that space operates at large and small scales through relativity and through quantum mechanics. And it's flawed if we really attend to it by personal experience. If we choose to notice it, we feel ourselves being in space as well as being in matter. And so that distinction of, to the extent that matter and being are correspondent, then again that distinction between matter and space breaks down. I suppose what I'd like to argue is that space is a kind of matter, the fifth state of matter, the fifth state. Yeah, there's like fire, water, earth, air, and then there's space, maybe.